we go. Okay. Wouldn't be a day in 2020 without some technical problems. Anyway, I'm Lee Erickson. I am the Chief Amplifier at the Happy Valley LaunchBox, and this is our fall series all about breaking in. We've been hosting a series of speakers on different aspects of breaking in, from new mindsets to new business models. Quick reminder that we are recording these sessions and we'll be posting them to our YouTube channel. And if at any time you have questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A. Today, our topic is breaking in new habits, recommendations for creating sustainable habits that allow you to be your best, most creative self. And our guest today is Lorraine. Nova is an award-winning fashion designer, founder, and creative director of Rain magazine. If you haven't seen her fashions, they are quite unique and quite creative. And Rain is all centered around discovery, creativity, and entrepreneurship. So we're really excited to hear some of the recommendations she has for re-energizing teams through focusing on creativity. So welcome, Nova.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So before we jump in to the top five, talk a little bit about what you mean by creativity and why you believe it's so critical to success, especially for people just getting started.
No, absolutely. I think when most people hear the word creativity, they think of the traditional sense of fine art, like a painter or a sculptor, or even a designer. And I think creativity touches everything and everyone, right? I mean, it's a matter of having original and imaginative ideas. Mm-hmm. And that can be applied anywhere from gardening mm-hmm. to fixing a problem in or around a home or a business. And then, of course, launching your own brand or business through entrepreneurship. And I blend the words creative and entrepreneurship together because I see that as creating something new within the space of business in the world of your traditional arts. So maybe in fashion or art or even technology. Technology, I feel, if you're creating a software or an app from scratch, you have to be extremely imaginative to be able to see that through to execution. So those are the areas, that I focus on when I speak of the creative entrepreneur, or those that are in the fashion, cultural, or technology industries.
Well, I like that expanded definition because so many times we think of creativity as art or drawing. And what you're saying is you can be creative, right, in your business model, which might not seem like a creative endeavor, but it definitely is a new way of thinking of things.
Absolutely.
All right. So let's jump into your top five. Okay. So your first recommendation is own your talent. So talk a little bit about what you mean by owning your talent and how that connects to this concept of creativity for entrepreneurs.
Absolutely. We are all born with gifts. And I think we sort of take those gifts for granted. I'm sure either grandma or mom or aunt would say, oh, you're so this, or you have such a talent for that. And depending on your environment, those gifts may be cultivated or not. But there's things intuitively that we know we can do well. Right. So I have 4 children and one of my children has an amazing memory. I mean, she can remember things way back when she was 2 and she remembers everyone's birthdays, friends and family. And, she's in the journalism and media field as well. So she could use that skill, her memorization skill for, things within that field. So I feel like we kind of brush off what comes easy to us. And that's what we sort of have to own. Maybe you have an eye for something. Maybe you're a great communicator. I love language and I can learn languages very easily. Mm-hmm. And I love culture. So I bring all of those things within what I do. And that's what I mean by owning your own talent is do not be bashful with the gifts that you were born with, that are in you. And then, of course, we all have the ability to build on those gifts and add on to those gifts. So, I was born in Jamaica and we were raised to be very humble and, and I think that's great. Humility is great, but then we have to be our own cheerleader. And having been a cheerleader in college, I'm definitely, I still have that inner cheerleader within me. But you have to be able to root your own self on. When I'm working with interns and mentoring new talent, and I say, okay, talk about yourself. well, you know what? You need to show off. This is your time to shine. And I think that, again, if we can just take a moment and say, what do I do kind of well? Maybe you cook really well. Maybe you clean really well. It doesn't have to be a technical skill, such as painting or writing or what have you, but own that talent, because that could really help you carve a niche within whatever you choose to do.
What are some practical ways that people can begin to own their talent, right? And I know you're not saying be braggadocious, right? But
Right.
what are some ways that you've found that have been helpful for people to kind of project that and own that with others?
Well, I think exploration is one thing. So just start figuring out what those things are, because I believe we're all multi-talented. So I, one time, just reached out to a few close friends and say, what do you think I'm really good at? Because again, I think we sort of take those things for granted. And if you get an outside person, able to say, well, you know what, you do that really well. You may not even have thought about that thing. So that's one thing. And then once you have a beginning of those things, technical skills, maybe it's ideation, just coming up with ideas, whatever that is, I make a list of that and see how can you bridge the gap between what you're good at and what you love.
Excellent. Okay, let's jump on to number 2. Keep track of your ideas. So why is it important to track ideas, and what are some practical ways you recommend people can go about doing that?
Absolutely. Well, why it's important is that a lot of times our ideas come to us when we least expect it. We might be in the shower, we might be driving, maybe it's as soon as we wake up in the morning from a dream, maybe it was in the dream, and then we sort of brush it off for whatever reason. But if you read about the greatest inventors and artists, a lot of them had ideas that were from their dreams, or that they did jot down and then they reflected on those ideas later. And a lot of the projects that I'm working on, when people hear about all the things I'm doing, they're like, oh my gosh, how are you doing it? Well, they were all seeds that were planted long ago that started with an idea, and I wrote it down. And then that idea germinates. And then slowly it grows into maturity. And so some ways that you can keep track of those ideas, first of all, keep a journal by your bed. I've had the best design dreams. Okay.
In the middle of the night.
I mean, listen, and even, my stories, I write fiction as well. A lot of them come to me in my dreams, and I'll just wake up and I'll share it verbally, and then I'll write it down. So keeping a journal, your smartphone, if you're not a fan of writing things down, you have a notepad. Most people have a notepad. You could text yourself. You could do a voice memo, whatever's easier for you. And you could kind of brush it off, but you never know what that can turn into. For example, I was traveling with my son from one of his competitions, and we had a layover in Houston. We got off the plane, and for whatever reason, this idea came to me. It was a historical fictional idea, the characters, the names of the characters, the setting. And I was like, I just shared it with my son. I was like, what do you think about this? He's like, oh my gosh, that's such a great story. That was maybe 5 years ago. That story then turned into a screenplay, and now it's being developed into a musical. And it was literally, it just came to me on a layover between flights, and I wrote it down. And so I have many stories like that. My book, Unleash Your Supernova, I was taking a shower and just the thoughts came to me, the chapters came to me, the title came to me, and I was like, wrote it down. And I shared it with a few people because I like to test my ideas. I'm like, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And if it gets a positive reaction, then I take action.
Right. Well, and that's great. And there's actually some science behind this, this seed germinating, right? This kind of debunking of the eureka moment, right? There isn't a eureka. It's people that have germinated on some idea over time, right? And they may come to a conclusion and they think eureka. But so that's great. Do you recommend that founder CEOs engage their employees in doing that?
Absolutely. I love working with a team. I've always been a part of a team. I come from a large family. I have 5 siblings. There's 6 of us. And so we had to learn to work together early on. And that unity was fostered early on. And I was an athlete for most of my life. So I really love ideating and co-creating. And I do believe magic happens when you're doing it with other individuals. And that's why I like sharing my ideas. And because then that will then add to it. And that will add to like, oh, I didn't think about that. I didn't think about that. So I love picking the brains of my team. Everyone's coming from a different perspective, different experiences, different way of seeing the world. And I think that is powerful. So I absolutely recommend for founders, if you are a solopreneur, reach out to your close family and friends. Ask a stranger. That's really fun when you test an idea on a stranger, or you ask for an idea from a stranger, and really tap into that community around you. And those that are building a team, really foster an environment where people feel that they can share. I mean, some of the most amazing ideas will come from your team. We have a cover story that did very well. It was Kendall Jenner in her early days of modeling. And it was my research editor that came to me and said, hey, how about we feature not Kim, not Kylie, but why don't we feature Kendall? And I was like, we did a little research and I thought it was great. And then look at Kendall now.
Yeah, she's definitely killing it. All right, excellent. So let's go on to number 3. Don't be reality's fool. So I was pretty intrigued by this one. Can you elaborate what you mean by reality's fool and maybe provide an example of this?
Yeah, absolutely. So we only know what we know. And again, depending on your environment, who you're around, what you're being told, what you're seeing on social media, you may want to move forward on something, but feel stuck because you're like, well, how can I do that? I don't have this, I don't have that. And our first reaction is to find all the no's and all the reasons why we can't do something and all the reasons why something is going to fail. And that might be just being a product of your environment, as opposed to, well, what can do or what can happen for this to succeed, right? Because where you are right now is not where you have to be tomorrow. And it's not where you're going to be tomorrow. And so you have to sort of see past your current reality. If you want to be, I had someone share with me, I want to create the next Hearst, empire, the next media empire. And she's fairly young. She's in her early to mid 30s and she's a female and, she's a mom. And where she is right now, if she shared that with someone else, they might be like, oh, you're crazy. Or what are you doing? Or you know what it takes to do that? And do you know who you need to know? You know how much money, and where she's like, nope, this is what I want to do. And I know this is not where I am right now, but going back to the whole thing about planting seeds, what she's doing is planting the seeds to get there. So she's slowly developing creative assets that are going to, one, attract either investors or other publications, as well as developing her own. And then one day you wake up and say, oh my gosh, I actually own a media empire, right? When we hear success stories of individuals, we usually hear it when they're close to the top or at the top. We don't necessarily hear it from day 1, 0 days to 360 days, or even those first 3, 4, 5 years. I'm in the podcast space, and when I came across Joe Rogan's story, I was like, oh, yes, I want to be like a Joe Rogan podcast. He has millions of listeners, and I love how he, who he gets as guests and his style. Well, guess what? It took 10 years for Joe Rogan to get where he is. He didn't start with the same format. He didn't start with the same listenership, but look where he is now. But most people who are getting on his bandwagon only know about him in the last few years and like all of a sudden, he's like the #1 podcast. And no, that took time as well to germinate. And so if he believed back then when he took a chance on podcasting as a comedian, one of the first comedians in the space, if he decided, well, no, this is not for me, and this doesn't even exist as a real industry, or comedians don't do podcasts, they do stand up. If he made that choice based on where he was then, he wouldn't be where he is now. And that's what I mean by don't be reality's fool.
Right. No, that's great. There's a lot of making things accessible, right? And just doing it. Excellent. All right, let's jump on to number 4. Create a sustainable environment. So the word sustainable conjures up a lot of different meanings, right? So help us understand what you mean by a sustainable environment and how that encourages creativity.
Absolutely. So obviously we're in a time period where we're all very sensitive to what's happening around us outside our home. And to be honest, we aren't separate from nature. We're actually one with nature. But because we have these physical structures that we sleep in at night, we see ourselves as being very separate. I see sustainability in the most general sense, to endure, to last. And it really starts with ourselves, right? And protecting the earth is helping us protect ourselves. This is our home. And so sustaining self starts with your body, your mind, even your spirit. If you are angry, stressed, or depressed, are you going to have the motivation to get up in the morning, to go to work, to go to school, to be around your friends and family? And if you are, are you really being productive? Are you really contributing, to that community, to that project, to that tribe? And so starting with yourself and finding those tools and tactics to increase your sense of creativity, to help avoid that burnout that happens just based on the culture we live in. And so some of those tricks are using music, using colors, using textures, using smells. It's really activating your five senses. So there are certain sounds and frequencies that tend to make us more creative. It's, from the solfeggio frequency, the original musical scale. And so just looking up, well, what type of music can help me be calmer or more creative? And there are plenty of resources out there. There's a lot of classical music, jazz music, reggae that tends to bring you into that vibe or mode. I love using 528 hertz. There's a lot of research on it. I have it in my book. And it's a frequency that's present all around us in nature and also within our own DNA. It's fascinating. So I just go on YouTube, I plug in 528 and this beautiful music pops up. Also colors. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying also colors, putting colors in your environment that excite you, that you love. And I have sunflowers around me with this beautiful, vibrant yellow. So even if it's gloomy outside, I see this beautiful plant that reminds me of the sun. I have a marigold throw next to me as well, that gives me the warm and fuzzies, despite, what the weather is like outside. And I love flowers. So I put flowers around me. And so just think of the things that make you feel good, put that in your environment, put it in eyesight. And so you're able to conjure those feelings and benefit from the positivity that they're giving you. Sound is another very important thing as well. And smells. So candles.
Yeah.
Candle behind me. So it's really finding ways to actualize your senses, because what that does is it brings you into the present moment. And when you're in the present moment, you're feeling that sense of peace. And then you're able to really unleash your supernova, like I say on my podcast or my book.
What I like about that framing, we hear a lot, especially in the startup world, about, avoiding burnout, right? But this is a much more positive way. So avoiding burnout, to me, you think, oh, I'm burning out, I better do something. So what you're saying is, well, don't wait till the point of burnout to fix it, right? Create a sustainable way of living through your entrepreneurial journey. So it's in sync with all the other things we've talked about. It's a very positive stance on something that could often be considered fairly negative. Okay, so let's talk about number five. Enjoy the journey. All right. So we know that envisioning, starting, and building a business is plenty of ups and downs, right?
Oh, yeah.
So what is it about enjoying the journey that is so important? And what do you recommend founders do when they're in those not such enjoyable times?
Well, and this took a while for me to even figure out. And, I've always been very goal driven and ambitious. So I would write down my goals and write down my task list, and that's it. What's next? And then you're at a certain point and everything else, the whole time is a blur. You're like, whoa, how did I even get here? or you have an accomplishment and you maybe appreciate it for those few seconds. And you're like, okay, what's next? There's always going to be what's next, right? That's our nature. We're here to grow, expand, evolve. Just because you got that first goal doesn't mean, okay, you're done. There's always going to be something you want to do or learn, or someone you want to spend time with, or someone you want to meet. And so the process, what I've learned, is not so much about the goals. It's what we're learning along the way, who we're meeting along the way, who the experiences we're building, falling down, getting back up, growing. The personal growth that I have experienced is priceless, regardless of if any of my ideas ever germinate or not, or get executed or not, I have grown so much from day one, when I decided to launch my fashion company, to where I am now. And that's powerful, and it's inspiring my children. And so know that there's always going to be a goal. There's always going to be a what's next. Take the time to appreciate your accomplishments, pat yourself on the back, and really focus on, what is it that I want to get out of today? What is that experience that I want to get out of today? Yesterday, for example, I woke up and I said, ooh, I'm so excited about the surprise I'm going to get today. That was it.
Yeah, well, that's a great way of looking at 2020, right? Hey, what surprise is going to come next, right? But that, again, that's that really positive attitude. So I think that's a great message, especially right now. So we have time for some Q&A. We have some questions queued up. So Mark he says, I have a lot of things I'm pretty good at. Which one should I pursue, or maybe, focus on in terms of my talents, owning it?
Yes. Well, I would say, if you look at what I'm doing now, there's so many different things. But I started with what, at that moment in time, today, because we're multifaceted, we're multi-talented. What is it that stimulates me most today? What turns me on most today? And build on that. So let's say there's 3 things you like. And if you had to rank them and say, you know what? And I give this question a lot to my interns, individuals that I'm mentoring, my children. I said, if you had to do one thing all day, 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours, and not get paid for it for a year, what would that be? Mm-hmm. Because essentially, when you're starting a business, you're hustling, you're putting in a lot of time, and you may or may not get paid. But if you love it, it's not really work, right? And if you're good at it, people are going to recognize it. And if you have a passion for it, you're going to do your best. And so you may have to pivot and change and figure out new strategies, but you're going to be successful. So what is the thing that motivates you most today? I started in fashion. That evolved into Rain magazine, because my journey as a creative entrepreneur was such a roller coaster ride. And I was meeting such incredible people. I wanted to help them, and so Rain was my way of giving back, to give a platform to entrepreneurs, creatives who understood that journey. And I knew the struggles of getting promotion and PR early on, and I knew how much meeting someone else that was doing what I was doing, meant to me. And I knew what it was like to be found by a consumer or an investor. And so I wanted to create a platform that could help others, sort of shortcut the struggles that I went through. And then that evolved into continuing consulting, more full time, and helping other founders really take their ideas to the next level using my creative aesthetic and my brand strategies, and sort of bringing the psychology in with the design. And so that's going to change and evolve and build. But I started with fashion because I was obsessed with fashion. And that's what helped drive the journey for me initially, and helped me find other things that I loved and wanted to do.
So that kind of leads us to a question that, Derek asked, which is, you can find something you like, and you're talking about kind of a focus on today, which I think is important. So, but how do you keep going when it can take 10 years to be successful, and you don't always know that you're going to like what you like today, tomorrow?
That's a good question. Well, if you are thinking 10 years out, you're way too far ahead. And again, I'm speaking from experience, because that was me. And 10 years out could seem a little frightening, terrifying, especially where you are right now. And I say, bring it back. So for example, if, when I go back to being in the present moment, right? It's so much easier if you just deal with where I am right now. What is the next step that I can take? The next step is maybe creating a task list. And that's not intimidating. And you can just prioritize today what you want to do. And then those tasks will lead you to something else. If you are a little too far ahead, that brings on anxiety, or stress. If you're a little too far in the past, then that can bring on depression or anger or frustration, because of woulda, shoulda, coulda. But when you're present, you're right here, right now. And if you're able to appreciate where you are right now, I mean, at the end of the day, if you're breathing, that's a lot.
Good day.
It's the little things. If you wake up and can breathe, that is a lot. And then you just add on to those things. And you're like, well, what are the resources that I have right now? Well, I have time on my hands, or I have an aunt that's willing to support me and she might be a mentor, or I have a friend that's willing to invest in me and then they can help me with project number one. Number one may only be $50, right? As opposed to 5 million. So I would say bring it back. And going back to my point is, what is it that excites you most right now? And what is one thing you can do to move forward, to push forward? And it could be really small, and then that's fine.
So we have time for one more question, but maybe just one suggestion. So Elizabeth says, I have some really talented employees. How do I get them to express their creativity at work? So maybe one trick for that.
Create a meeting and say, we're going to be ideating today. We're going to be sharing ideas today. Some people are shy because they don't want to be, seen as, oh, that wasn't good or that wasn't. I think it comes from the leader and creating that culture and letting them know all ideas are welcomed. All ideas are encouraged. I worked at a company that asked us to submit ideas during the week into an idea bucket. And then we met, and the ideas that were selected for that week was shared, and it was all anonymous. So that's another way of doing it as well.
That's a great example. Anyway, no, but I could talk to you for the rest of the day. I actually already feel a little more energized listening to you, positive. It's good. No, it really is a great kind of a positive note to think about today and what you value today and what you can do today, but it still moves you forward towards something that you're looking for. So it's a lovely message. For those of you listening, you can check out Nova's magazine and her new podcast. And I'm guessing your book is on the site too at Rain Magazine, and that's RAINE. We also welcome your feedback on our series. Just drop us a message in the Q&A window before you sign off. And then this, as with all of our other top fives, will be archived on our YouTube channel. So thank you again, Nova. I truly appreciate it. Have a wonderful day. I'm going to go run out and get me some sunflowers right now to put in my office. All right. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes. For the rest of you, our series is over. We're concluding right now. Again, you can go to our YouTube video for that. And if you are interested in learning more about our programs or any of our accelerators in the new series coming up, just go to launchbox.psu.edu and sign up for our newsletter. Thank you so much.